Well, back in the 1930s, the father of modern economy, John Maynard Keynes, predicted that within 100 years, people will work only 15 hours per week. Modern days thinkers went even further. They believe that the concept of work will not exist in a distant future. They're also predicting that the concept of religion, politicians, and the concept of community will fall. Therefore, we will work to give our lives a meaning. It may sound crazy, but when you look at the data, in the 19th century, the average work week, the time that people need to spend on work, was about 80 hours. Within this century, it shrank up to the 60 hours, and until 1970, it shrank even further, and it remains about 40 hours per week until today. I'm not sure if the work as a concept is going to erode within our lifetimes, so we have to struggle with this issue at least for a few next decades. However, the work that we are going to take is going to be very much different than the work of our fathers and grandfathers. They used to do a lot of manual tasks in a factory. These jobs are gone. These jobs are going to be replaced soon by robots. Actually, World Economic Forum is predicting that within the next 4 years, 70 million of jobs will disappear because of some sort of automation. Should we be afraid then? Are we going to be unemployed soon? Not necessarily, because the same story happened 100 years ago when the first technological revolution entered the factories. Workers were saying, hey, we are going to lose our jobs soon. Surprisingly, 100 years later, we have on the global scales more jobs than ever before. There are areas on the world where the unemployment is at the record low levels, and people don't really understand what is going on. I think the reason is that the economy is a very complex system with a lot of complex elements in a very different relationship. One of the best stories that is describing this relationship was when the Walter Reuther on the picture here was visiting the Ford factory. Walter Reuther was a human rights movement activist, and also a chief of the social union. And when he was visiting Ford factory, he was walking through this new factory with a lot of machines and only a few workers. He was approached by one of the Ford executives, and this guy told him, hey, Walter, how are you going to make these machines pay your union fees? Well, Walter famously replied, I have no idea, but the problem is, how are you going to make these machines to buy your cars? Now, this simple story tells us a very profound story about the economy. It's very complex equations. When some jobs are lost in some areas, in other areas we're gaining jobs. The same report that I mentioned before, which is telling us about the 70 million jobs that we're going to lose, is also telling us that at the same time we'll gain 130 million of new jobs. The problem is we have no idea what kind of jobs there are going to be, because they are definitely not going to be like the jobs of our fathers. And we are completely unprepared from the educational system point of view to give us some sort of advance in the near future. But I hope that today I can tell you a few stories. What can you do right now to make your life or make your job a little bit future-proof? So this is Michał, at least a very blurry picture of Michał. Michał, in 2017, used to be a teacher in middle school, in Polish middle school. But in the afternoons, he was a YouTuber. He was producing videos telling people very complex videos about the role-playing games. Well, in his normal life, Michał was a student's advisor. He was a career planner, so he was responsible to make sure that his students, his pupils, are going to be successful in their professional life. But the problem is that Michał soon found out that he needs to have career advice himself, because the Polish education system went through a huge, enormous reform, restructurization that integrated the middle schools with primary schools. And many people like Michał found to be obsolete. So additionally, his wife was expecting a baby, so you can imagine it was a really difficult time for him. At first, he started to look for a job as a teacher, but he's coming from a small town. It's not really find a job for this kind of skills in a small town. As an act of desperation, he reached out to his community. He says, listen, I have a problem, but what I really would love to do is to do these YouTube videos and talk to you about the role-playing games all day long. I want it to be my full-time profession. The response from the community was extraordinary. All of them chipped in, or at least a portion of them chipped in, and right now Michał is earning more than 5 times on a monthly basis than his colleagues in the teacher jobs. Well, I can see that you're not totally convinced, because not everyone can be a YouTuber, right? But I can also tell you that the passion is helping you grow your corporate careers. So if you allow me to change the slide, then I can tell you the next story about me, about Jacob. The next one, thank you. Keep trying. Not this one. Anyway, I met Jacob. Jacob is working in a big IT company with headquarters in Silicon Valley, right? That's the guy. And I met him 9 years ago. When the company, and I was recruiting Jacob for a company, I was having an interview with him, but this interview went sideways. We soon started to discuss about his hobbies, and he happens to be a passionate traveler with a positive fixation on railways, trains, and bikes. But he did more than just traveling. What he also did was that he created digital map systems where other travelers can share the maps within each other. He called it a share map, and within the years, it gains a lot of popularity. Actually, tens of thousands of people started to use it. And at this moment, the interview was over. I never asked him about his IT skills because I knew that someone who was able to build such a system is more than qualified to be a software engineer, right? He did not stop there. I observed and I see his career over the last 9 years. He's trying to put his passion in every element of his work for the benefit of his employer. In many cases, his skills related to digital map help close multi-million-dollar deals. He's right now a manager himself. He's running a large software engineering team, but at the same time, in the afternoons, he's still building a lot of maps. So let me tell you another story, because many young people are actually struggling finding their own passion. They actually have the expectation that someday they will wake up and they will find out, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a YouTuber, whatever. I don't think it's the case for most of us. For most of us, finding your passion is a process. And for this process, the grown-ups are responsible, those who are organizing the education system. This is my son, Staś. He's sitting up there. And I want to tell you a story how you can grow a passion, because a few years ago, we started to pay for his guitar lessons. And he was a solid student. He went for the lesson, he was playing, he was making some progress, but I never felt that the guitar was his thing, right? He never practiced at home. Suddenly something has changed. Actually, since 6 months, he's practicing at home so often I have to ask him to stop playing. Well, I found out that his wife's teacher at school asked him to be a tutor for younger colleagues. And that, in my opinion, has changed his attitude to the guitar. Because he had a community, this community gave him a lot of feedback, so there was an interaction between the community. He had additional responsibility, additional motivation. He started to practice more. At the same time, he was getting better, and he was feeling that the guitar is much more fun for him. So I think the passion can be something that we can thought other people. Well, the last story is about me. It's a bittersweet story. It's about my education. Well, I grew up in 1980s in communistic Poland, and the school back there was very much following something that we call the Prussian model. Well, the teacher was speaking, and the students were supposed to sit, make notes, and be silent. Well, when I was 10, that was the last things I wanted to do. The school did not offer me anything interesting from my point of view at that time. It was so boring, and I was honestly a terrible student for my teachers. Well, I had this strange hair that's, you can see here. It's called, I learned that yesterday, it's called rat tail, right? Don't judge me, it was a very fashionable thing in the 1980s, right? So one day when I was playing around with my rat tail, the teacher was so nervous that she took me to the center of the class, and in front of everybody, she took a scissor and cut it off. Well, as you can imagine, I wasn't very happy, and I expressed my unhappiness in very inappropriate words. Well, at that time, that was a very hard offense, and my mother was asked for a school next day, and I was expelled immediately. First, I thought, well, what worse can happen? That was probably the worst school on the planet. Well, I soon found out I was very wrong. The rest of my primary school was something I remember as the worst years in my life. I was depressed. There were times that I was actually hoping I will never wake up the next day, right? So that was a most terrifying time. I had the suicidal thoughts, and for some reasons, I miraculously survived through that school, through that horrible experience that I felt was created to put me in misery. Somehow I survived, and it was year 1991, when Poland was a free country, and the new schools were emerging, and new schools with enthusiastic teachers, with a new method of education. Well, in this new schools, the basic fundament of the school was that the teachers and students are partners. So we could choose, for example, how we're going to paint our class, how we're going to sit. Of course, we had the regular lessons, but I've spent at school about 10 hours, where probably 6 hours I was spending computer club, where my teachers help us organize. At the beginning, I was there mostly to play games, but in the 1990s, if you want to play a game with your friend, you need to create a network. There was no internet then, right? Well, back then, you need to acquire a lot of skills, and we acquired these skills completely unconsciously. I soon found out I was good in what I was doing, and that was one of the most profound things that I discovered. It was a process of discovering what I wanted to do, and school was the framework that was giving me this ability. Thanks to that decision, every single decision that I was making in my career was based actually on this story. And this school helped me to be a manager in of the multinational teams in a big IT company. I'm also teaching in a university, working on an open source software, economy of open source software, very fascinating subject. But after hours of running a crowdfunding platform called Patronite, where Michał and guys like Michał can obtain revenues from their communities, and they can turn their passions into their jobs. Actually, this TED is organized by IBRaszynska school. My school was organized by the same community called STO. This community not only organized a completely new framework of education, but I literally think that this school and this framework saved my life. Thank you.